I smiled softly and nodded in agreement as my fingers brushed through the dog's fur. It was quiet for a moment and I began to fidget slightly when I felt his gaze on me, but when I glanced up at him, he was looking out the window with an unreadable expression. I shrugged and continued to pet Blue, but the dog's head shot up and a low growl left his mouth and I immediately pulled my hand back and furrowed my eyebrows. "Why is he, Gabriel, babe, are you in here?" Her words died on her lips when Aunt Becky realized she found her husband. I bit my lip to hold in my chuckles as I watched Blue watch Becky with a guarded expression. He really didn't like her. "Oh hi, Eleanor," she said, and she smiled at me as she walked over to Gabriel and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Sorry if we woke you up," she giggled softly, and my nose scrunched up slightly as she reached up and pressed a sloppy kiss to his lips. I watched Gabriel pull away with an awkward look on his face, and he politely pulled her away from him so I wasn't forced to watch their PDA. She pouted but let it go and began to talk again. "Gabriel, do you want to go into the city tonight? There's a festival going on and I have a craving for some cotton candy." She bit her lip and her eyes widened in excitement as she waited for his answer. "Sure, Eleanor, do you want to come?" he asked, and Aunt Becky's excitement dropped and she pursed her lips as she glanced over at me with slightly narrowed eyes that Gabriel couldn't see. I gulped and looked between her challenging eyes and Gabriel's calm and friendly ones. I rolled my bottom lip between my teeth and hesitantly shook my head no, but in reality, I really wanted to go because I was becoming bored in this house and wanted to get out for a while. "No, I'm fine, you guys go ahead," I said, and the words stung leaving my lips because I really wanted to go. I watched a victorious smirk emerged on Aunt Becky's lips and she looked up at Gabriel and shrugged. "Oh, that's too bad, but next time you should come," she said, and I saw right through her act and I wondered why she was behaving like this. Was I really that much of an inconvenience to her life that she needed to act this way to have a moment alone with her husband? "No, she's coming and that's final," he said with a slight edge to his tone, and my lips twitched up while my aunts twitched down in a frown. I was glad he pushed for me to go because I was itching for some new scenery other than the countryside. So that's what we did. We loaded up in the car and began the 30-minute drive to the fair. Gabriel drove and my aunt sat in the passenger side and snuggled up to his side while I sat in the back and looked out the window. I kept feeling eyes on me, but every time I would look to catch them they were gone. I brushed off the feeling and just watched the landscape fly by as we drove. It was about noon now and Aunt Becky informed us that there was going to be a lot of people there because this fair was supposedly a big deal. I was excited at that because I loved crowds. I loved sitting back and just watching everyone walk around. It was weird, but I loved to people watch. We arrived and the lights of the fair weren't on yet since it was the middle of the day, but I could only imagine what this place looked like at sunset. The smell of fried food and popcorn filled my nose and the sound of children screaming and laughing echoed in my ears. It made me smile as I watched all of the commotion going on around me. I loved the fair. We walked around and I trailed behind Gabriel and Aunt Becky to give them privacy as they walked and held hands and chatted with each other. I took my time as I glanced around at pop-up shops, and occasionally I would have to pick up my pace when I fell too far behind because that would be very bad if I got lost here. Just like I predicted, as the sun began to set and the lights flickered on and the place became a new kind of alive. All the rides and tents lit up with colors and reflected off of everyone's faces as people smiled in awe at the displays. It was breathtaking. I followed Aunt Becky and Gabriel over to a picnic table where they were sharing a funnel cake, and when Gabriel offered me a piece, I declined and just continued to look around at everything and everyone. "Ella, is that you?" The familiar voice made me snap my head to my right and my eyes widened and a large smile that hasn't emerged in almost 3 months appeared on my face, and it kinda hurt to smile this big. "Oliver." I shot up from my seat and I stumbled a little because I couldn't get to him quick enough. When I did, I threw my arms around the boy and took in his familiar scent. He wrapped his arms around me and spun me around once before he set me down. He pushed me back at arm's length so he could get a good look at me and he smiled. "You look good, Love, he said, and I blushed slightly as I scanned my eyes over his lanky frame and up to his pale skin and pink lips, and his brown hair was long now and he had to keep running his hands through it to keep it out of his face. His thick brows raised and his green eyes widened in amusement as he noticed me taking him in. "Eleanor, who's this?" my aunt asked, and I spun around and my back pressed into Oliver's front and his hand instinctively wrapped around my waist to pull me close. I almost melted right there because I missed his touch so much. "Oh, this is Oliver, my ex. We had to call it off when I moved," I explained, and his grip tightened at the memory of us being forced to break up. I loved him, but it was best for both of us if we called things off. It was hard and only added to my misery of losing my mother, but it was my idea to break up. "Oliver, this is my Aunt Becky and her husband Gabriel," I said as I motioned to the two, and Oliver let go of me to shake their hands. Gabriel had an unreadable expression on his face, but he covered it up by continuing eating his food. Aunt Becky commanded us to sit and she began to fire question after question at Oliver, but he answered them with ease. I leaned into him as he spoke and his hand wrapped around my waist as he spoke. Apparently him and his family decided on a last-minute holiday to Amsterdam, and that's why he was in town, but sadly it was his last day. If only I would have ran into him sooner. "So you decided to go to the fair for your birthday?" he asked, and just his words made the whole table go tense and I wanted the ground to suck me up whole. I didn't want to tell anyone my birthday was today because I didn't want to be an inconvenience to anyone. "It's your birthday today?" Gabriel said with furrowed eyebrows, and I could tell he was frustrated, but what my aunt said took the heat off of me for a while. "Yeah, you didn't know that?" she asked as she spooned in more food to her mouth. Gabriel's eyes snapped to my aunt's and the fury in them made me want to get up and run, but I couldn't. I was glued to my seat. "No, I didn't know. Why didn't you say anything?" he snapped, and she shrugged and looked at him like he was being crazy. "What's the big deal, Gabriel?" she asked, and Oliver sucked in a breath and his grip tightened around me at her words. "What's the big deal?" His voice grew and I sank down in my seat and looked down in shame as they began to argue in front of me. "It's her fucking birthday, Rebecca," he said, and a few strangers' eyes glanced over at us, but Gabriel didn't care in the slightest. "What the hell were you thinking?" He sounded like a parent scolding a child, and Becky didn't like that at all because she sat up straighter and glared at him, and I knew it was about to get bad, so I quickly intervened. "Guys, please stop arguing," I said, and their eyes snapped to me. "I'm sorry, I didn't mention it was my birthday. This is my fault. You two finish your food and Oliver and I are going to go ride some rides. Please just drop it, I'm fine," I said, and before either one of them could say something I got up and I pulled Oliver away from the angry couple. "Sorry about that," he mumbled, and I looked up at him and grabbed his hand in mine. I sighed and shook my head. "It's not your fault, let's just drop it," I said, and he nodded and ran his thumb over my knuckles as we walked around the fair and examining all the rides. "So which ride does Eleanor Hobbs want to ride first of her 18th year of life?" he teased, and I giggled and pointed to a ride that was spinning around and causing the riders to scream and laugh. "That one? 3, 5, 5. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off, Joe class." Aunt Becky called me over when it was time to go. Her and Gabriel were awfully quiet as the four of us walked to the car. The only sounds were my giggles as Oliver whispered jokes into my ear and he pulled me close to him. It felt like old times again, but I was going to have to say goodbye to him again. Gabriel and Aunt Becky got into the car, but Oliver didn't let me go just yet. He pulled me closer to him and wrapped his arms around me. He smiled down at me, but the smile was filled with sorrow because he too was sad to say goodbye again. "Come visit me sometime soon, yeah?" I asked, and he nodded and brought his hand up and brushed my hair behind my ear. His eyes glanced down to my lips and he slowly leaned forward till his brushed against mine. An electricity flowed through me and I thought I would never feel this again. He pressed his lips against mine so softly and the kiss was sweet, but I felt like it was more of a bittersweet kiss. Because time would go on and people will grow older and Oliver wouldn't have time to come visit me like he said he would. I didn't know this now, but deep down my mind was telling me to make the most out of this. I pulled him closer and I ran my hand through his hair and deepened the kiss. The feeling of his tongue melting with mine made a soft, almost inaudible moan form in my throat. He pulled away when we had no more air in our lungs and he smiled at me. This time it wasn't sad, it was breathtaking. He ran his thumb over my bottom lip that was now swollen. "Happy birthday, love," he said, and we shared one more quick kiss before I returned to the car. It was silent when I shut the door and neither one of them spoke as Gabriel put the car in drive. I was embarrassed because they had to witness Oliver and I kiss, but the heavy weight on my shoulders overpowered my embarrassment. I was awfully sad now and I wondered if it would have been easier if I never bumped into Oliver today, but something in me tried to tell me I was stupid to think that. Yes, it was sad we had to say goodbye again, but it was my birthday and I got to spend it with someone who I love. So a bittersweet smile emerged on my lips as I watched the fair become smaller and smaller behind us as we drove. "Eleanor," my aunt's voice emerged from the tense silence in the car and I froze. "I would like to say sorry for not mentioning your birthday. I figured you wouldn't want to celebrate since it's the first one without Linda." I frowned as she turned her apology around and made me and Gabriel seem like the bad guys getting mad at her for doing such a selfless act. She always wanted to throw a pity party when she was in the wrong. She should have just said sorry and be done with it. The last part of her apology hit me and put me in a sour mood, but I still accepted it so her and Gabriel wouldn't fight anymore. Everyone was silent again and no one talked when we exited the car and entered the house. Aunt Becky beelined up the stairs to her room while I kneeled and greeted Blue, who was whimpering with excitement of everyone being home again. I glanced up and noticed Gabriel went into the kitchen and I heard him start to scrounge around for something. I patted Blue a couple more times before I got to my feet and followed the sounds in the kitchen. Gabriel was stretching up to search the top of one of the cabinets and his white shirt raised up and exposed the defined V of his lower abdomen. I quickly looked away and glanced up at what he was doing. I didn't ask any questions and I shuffled over to the fridge and pulled out some leftover soup Gabriel picked up for me at that vegan-vegetarian restaurant yesterday. He always did kind things like that for me or Aunt Becky and it always made me feel good, like someone cared for me. I heated up my food in the microwave and Gabriel was still searching around for something and he would mutter words under his breath when one spot didn't have what he was looking for. I avoided the counter that him and my aunt occupied this morning and I went over to the small dining table that we never ate at. We usually ate in the living room or at the counter, so it was odd sitting at the table, alone. I ate my soup silently and I heard a victorious sound leave Gabriel's lips and I glanced over at him, but his back was to me. I shrugged and continued to eat, but I looked back up from my bowl when I saw Gabriel walking over to me with his hands behind his back and a giddy smile on his face. "What are you doing?" I asked cautiously and he wordlessly answered by setting a muffin in front of me with a single candle poked into the center. He flicked a green lighter and the flame hovered over the candle till it was lit. My eyebrows raised and I brought my hand to cover my parted lips as I gasped, "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday dear Eleanor, happy birthday to you." He sang softly, nearly above a whisper and my eyes constantly shifted from the candle to him singing and when he was done he told me to make a wish. I bit my lip and I examined the burning candle and I thought about all the times I wished on my birthday and the wishes never came true. I knew this one would never come true so I could wish for whatever the heck I wanted and there would be nothing to fret about. So I closed my eyes and wished for someone to fill the hole in my heart, the hole that once held my mother, my grandparents and Oliver, all the people I loved but weren't in my life any longer. I wanted someone to fill that void. I opened my eyes and saw Gabriel grinning at me. "I know it's no big chocolate cake or anything, but it's a chocolate muffin so it's basically the same thing," he said as he pulled the candle out of the muffin and pushed it closer to me. I was relieved that we had at least one candle so at least something is going right on your birthday, he said and I nodded and